I found it on the second Saturday in October, in the crawlspace above the garage, when I went up there looking for a cardboard box marked Erin, 1989, in my own handwriting. Our daughter was expecting her first baby in April, and she had asked me whether I still had the little yellow sweater my mother knitted, the one Erin came home from the hospital in. I said of course I did, because I am the kind of woman who keeps things, and I climbed the pull-down ladder in my slippers to prove it. The box was behind Desmond's golf bag. I had to move the bag to get at it, and when I took hold of it by the strap, the weight of it was wrong. Not heavier, wronger. Something shifted along the inside of the bottom, where the vinyl lining had come loose from the frame years ago, and I put my hand in past the head covers and the sleeve of old scorecards, and I pulled out a blue passport. Brand new, stiff, the gold letters on the cover still sharp. It was my husband's, issued 3 weeks earlier. Inside was a photograph of a 74-year-old man I have slept beside for 39 years, taken at the drugstore counter on Ridge Street, his collar flattened wrong, and his eyes looking straight through the camera at something that was not in that drugstore at all. Paper-clipped behind it were the 2 spare photographs from the same sheet. Underneath both, wrapped in a supermarket bag, was his old passport, the one that had expired in 1998 and had not been out of the desk since before our daughter learned to drive. I want to be careful how I tell you this, because for a long time I got it wrong. Not a little wrong. Wrong the whole way through, in a way that took me 2 months and cost me something I am still paying off in small installments. Everything I am about to describe to you was real. I did not imagine one item of it, and that is the part that still frightens me. I gathered 9 true facts and strung them onto the wrong thread, and the necklace I made out of them looked so convincing that I very nearly carried it to a lawyer. My name is Rosalind. I am 63, and I have lived in the same house outside Ashbury Mills for 36 of those years, a brick ranch with a bad back step my husband has been meaning to fix since the Clinton administration. Desmond and I married in the spring of 1987. He was 35 and I was 24, and he had come over from Ireland at 22 with a duffel bag and a trade and no intention, he always said, of going back for anything but a funeral. He is a quiet man, and there are several kinds of quiet that get confused with each other. Desmond is not sullen, and he is not cold. He is the man who gets up at 5 and has the coffee made before I am awake, and who cried at both our children's weddings and did not care who saw. But he does not tell you things. He tells you around things. In 39 years, I learned the shape of his childhood the way you learn furniture in a dark room, by walking into it. A father who drank. A mother who scrubbed other people's floors in Ballyroe. 6 of them in 3 rooms. Left school at 14 and went out on the roads with a shovel. That was the whole of it, delivered over 4 decades in fragments. And if I pushed for more, he would smile and say, "Ah, Roz, there's nothing in it," and get up to see about the gutters. I opened the old passport before I opened the new one, sitting on a crossbeam with the fiberglass itching my legs. It had 1 stamp in it. Shannon, November 1988. His mother's funeral. I went with him on that trip, 18 months married, and I remember rain coming sideways at the graveside. And I remember that we stayed in Castlebar, and that his home village of Ballyroe was 12 miles up the road, and that he would not drive me out to see the house he grew up in. He said the road was bad. It was a perfectly good road. We flew home 4 days later, and he never went back. Not for his eldest sister's funeral in 2004, not for anything, and the passport went into the desk drawer and expired there, and I never once asked him why. So, there I was in my slippers with 2 passports in my lap, and my husband down in the yard below me, raking leaves off the septic bed. The first thought I had was not a thought at all. It was a cold feeling behind my breastbone that went out to my fingers. He is going somewhere. He is going somewhere, and he has not told me, and he has hidden the means of getting there inside a golf bag he has not touched since his shoulder surgery 4 years ago. I put everything back exactly as I found it. Notice that, because it was the first decision, and every other decision I made for the next 2 months came out of it. I could have carried that passport down the ladder and set it on the kitchen table and said, "Desmond, what is this?" It would have taken 11 seconds. Instead, I slid it back along the lining, stood the bag where it had been, took the box marked Aaron, 1989, and went down and made lunch. And when he came in with his hands smelling of wet leaves, I asked him whether he wanted the soup or the sandwich. Why? I have turned that over more times than I can count. Part of it was cowardice, plain and simple, but part of it was something I think a lot of women my age will recognize. After 39 years, you are not afraid of the fight. You are afraid of the answer. I did not ask because I did not want to be told, standing in my own kitchen with the soup on, that he was leaving. So I decided, in the way you decide these things without ever putting words to them, that I would find out first. That was the beginning of the 2 months. From the inside, it never once felt like a woman losing her grip. It felt like a woman being careful. I started with money, because money is where I am comfortable. I did the books for Ahern Masonry for 22 years, and there is not much you can hide from a woman who has reconciled a bank statement every month since 1990. I pulled the savings account going back 18 months and sat at the dining room table with a legal pad while he was at the hardware store. The withdrawals started in March. $400, cash, at the branch on Delaney, not the machine outside. $600 in April. $350 in May. Nothing in June. $800 in July, which was the biggest. More in August, more in September. Always cash, always at the counter, always on a weekday morning when I would have assumed he was at the coffee shop with Ray Petrasky and the other retired men who solve the world's problems over refills. When I stopped adding, the column came to $3,780. Our joint account. Money I would never have missed. A man does not take that out $400 at a time unless he does not want it showing up somewhere. That is not paranoia. That is bookkeeping. The phone bill was next. We still keep the landline, and I have the paper bill mailed because I like paper. I went back through 6 months of them, and there they were. International calls. The same number every time, starting with a 353, and I did not have to look it up because I knew it from the years we called his sisters at Christmas. Ireland. 11 calls in 6 months, everyone placed between 6:30 and 7:15 in the morning. One ran 41 minutes. One, in late August, ran 52. 6:40 in the morning. I get up at 7. He gets up at 5. That small, ordinary gap between when my husband's day starts and when mine does had been sitting there for 39 years like an unlocked door, and I had never once thought about it. Now, I could not think about anything else. I lay in bed the next few mornings with my eyes shut and listened to the murmur of him downstairs, and I could not make out words, only the rhythm, and the rhythm was not a man talking to his sister about the weather. It was low and slow, and it went on. Then I found the name. It was on the notepad by the kitchen phone, and the sheet had been torn off. But you know how a pad keeps the pressure of the pen on the page underneath? I did the thing I am ashamed of. I took the side of a pencil to it, the way you see on television, and what came up was a phone number, and above it, 2 words. M. Corrigan. I want to be honest about what that did to me. I stood in my own kitchen holding a grocery pad and felt the floor go soft. A woman's name. An Irish number. 52 minutes at 10 past 6 in the morning while I slept upstairs. Cash coming out of our savings. A new passport hidden in a golf bag. I did not have to build the story. The story built itself, and it was the oldest story there is, and every woman I have ever known has been handed some version of it. I did not cry. I made a file. I say that plainly because it tells you more about me than anything else here. I took a manila folder out of the office supply drawer and labeled it, in pencil, with the letter D, and into it went a photocopy of the notepad sheet, my column of withdrawals, and the phone bills with the calls marked in yellow. I kept it in the bottom of my sewing basket, under the batting, where he would sooner have taken up ballet than gone looking. October went into November, and the clues did not stop coming. Once you have decided what the story is, the world will hand you evidence for it every single day. It cannot help itself. He gave away his tools. Not all of them, but the good ones, over 3 weeks, quietly. The 2 long levels and the transit went to a young fellow who had worked summers for him, a boy who cried in our driveway while Desmond stood there saying, "Ah, now, they're only tools." He called our insurance agent and had the beneficiary paperwork sent out, both policies. He asked me one evening, out of nowhere, whether I would sell the house if it were only me in it, and when I said what a thing to ask, he said he was only wondering, and turned the television up. And he was not sleeping. I would wake at 2 or 3, and the bed beside me would be cool, and I would find the light on over the workbench in the garage, and him sitting out there on the stool in his coat, with his hands on his knees, not doing anything. No project, no radio. Once I stood in the mudroom doorway watching him through the glass, and he never moved, and I went back to bed and thought, he is saying goodbye to this house. The hotel receipt came in the middle of November. His truck needed inspection, and I ran it over to Kessler's, and while I waited, I cleaned out the door pocket the way I always do, and in among the parking stubs there was a folded receipt from the Ardmore Inn in Philadelphia. One night, September the 11th, $142. Philadelphia, September the 11th. I remember exactly what I had been told about that day, because I had asked him to be home in time for Aaron's ultrasound pictures coming over the computer, and he had said he was driving down to a salvage yard outside Lancaster with Ray to look at reclaimed brick for the church committee, and that they might stay over rather than come back at night on the turnpike. I said, fine, drive safe. I called Ray Petrasky's wife 2 days later on a pretext about a bake sale, and I asked her, light as anything, whether the men had found their bricks down in Lancaster in September. She said Ray had not been out of the county since Labor Day on account of his knee. That was the night I stopped sleeping properly. Not the passport, not the money, the bricks. Because until then, everything I had was circumstantial, and now I had a lie, a plain one, told to my face in my own kitchen and confirmed by a woman who had no idea she was confirming it. The last piece came the first week of December. His good coat came back from the cleaners, and I checked the pockets the way my mother taught me, and there was a folded sheet from Corley Travel on Main Street, the little agency where Mrs. Corley has been booking the parish trips since before I moved here. An itinerary. Philadelphia to Dublin, departing the 4th of March. One passenger, D.A. Hearn. There was no return. I sat down on the bench in the hall with my husband's coat across my knees and read that piece of paper maybe 15 times. One passenger, no return. Our first grandchild was due the 11th of April. He had booked himself out of the country, one way, 5 weeks before his own daughter gave birth, and had not said one word to me about any of it. I telephoned my friend Loretta Vance that night and told her all of it, and Loretta, who is kind and practical, said the thing everybody says, which is that I had to talk to him. I said I would. Then I did not. Instead, I called an attorney in Warrensburg, whose name I got out of the church bulletin of all places, a woman named Delia Hart, and made an appointment for the 17th of December, and told her secretary it was a consultation regarding marital assets, and hung up and went and washed the breakfast dishes, and my hands did not shake at all, which I found more disturbing than if they had. I want to stop here a moment, because this is where the story turns. In 8 weeks, I had assembled a complete and internally consistent account of my own life. A name, a number, a lie about bricks, a hotel room, $3,700 in cash, a one-way ticket. I could have laid that folder in front of any 12 people in Ashbury Mills, and every one of them would have said the same thing to me, gently, the way you tell somebody their dog has to be put down. And there was one thing in it that did not fit. There had been all along. I had looked straight at it in the first week of November and explained it away, and it took me until the 15th of December to go back for it. It was a receipt. Desmond keeps receipts the way other men keep grudges. There is an accordion folder in the bottom drawer of the desk in the back room, 12 pockets marked for the months, and everything goes in it. Every gas station, every prescription, every bag of mulch, because 30 years of running your own business gets the habit into your hands. In November, going through that desk for anything with a number on it, I had pulled the September pocket and worked down through it, and about halfway there was a small slip from the post office on Delaney Street. Passport services. Expedited processing fee, $60. Photo service, $15. Paid in cash. And on the back, in ballpoint, in his handwriting, the date and the word passport, because that is how he labels things. In November, I looked at that slip and thought exactly one thing, which was, he paid cash so it would not show on the statement. That fitted my story so neatly that I put it back in the September pocket, closed the drawer, and went on hunting. On the 15th of December, 2 days before my appointment, I went into that desk again for the deed and the title work because Delia Hart's secretary had asked me to bring what property documents I could find, and I pulled the September pocket out, and the little post office slip fell on the floor by my foot. I picked it up, and I stood there in the back room in the middle of the afternoon and heard myself say out loud, to nobody, well, that is wrong, because a man who is disappearing does not keep the receipt. He does not pay cash to hide a transaction and then file the proof of it, labeled in his own handwriting, in the drawer of his own desk, in a folder his wife has had her hands in every tax season for 22 years. That is not hiding. Those two things cannot both be true about the same man on the same morning. I sat down in his chair and thought about it a long while, and the longer I thought, the worse it got, because once that one detail came loose, the whole necklace started sliding off the thread. He had paid cash for a $60 fee and filed it. He had hidden a passport in a golf bag and left both spare photographs clipped inside it where any thief would find them. He had taken money out 400 at a time and never once opened an account I could not see. He had lied about the bricks and then put the hotel receipt in the door pocket of the truck I drive to inspection every November. Those are not the acts of a man covering his tracks. Those are the acts of a man who has never in his life done anything underhanded and does not know how, and who is doing something he cannot say out loud. I called Delia Hart's office the next morning and canceled. That evening, after supper, I got the folder out of my sewing basket and laid it on the kitchen table, and I sat down across from my husband and said, Desmond, I found the passport in October. I need you to tell me what it is for. He went the color of the tablecloth. He did not shout, and he did not deny one syllable. He put both hands flat on the table the way he does, and looked at them and said, I was going to tell you in February. I had a date picked. I had it picked since the summer. Then he told me. It took him until nearly 1 in the morning, and I do not think I said 20 words in the whole of it. In the summer of 1971, my husband was 19 and working as a laborer on an arterial drainage scheme out beyond Ballyroe in County Mayo. They were putting in culvert runs across low, wet ground, and any man who has been near a trench knows that soft, wet ground is the ground that kills you. They were down 5.5 feet, and they should have been timbered. They were not. The ganger had the timbering stacked at the top of the field and would not spare the hours to set it because there was an inspection coming at the end of the month, and they were behind on the run. There was a boy on that crew called Podrick Lynch. Everybody called him Poddy. He was 17 and small for it, and he had the job of running the barrows because he was the youngest, and he had a sister and a mother in a cottage on the Ballyroe Road. On the 19th of July, at about 11:30 in the morning, my husband was working the line at the top of the cut and needed somebody to hold the far end of a string line for 2 minutes while he took a level. That is all it was, 2 minutes. And he stood up and called down the field, Poddy, come here to me and hold this. The wall came in while the boy was standing in it. Not all of it. About 9 feet of the western face, wet clay, the whole of it at once. They had him out in under 6 minutes, and it did not matter in the slightest, because it was not the burying that did it. It was the weight coming across his chest. There was an inquest that autumn in Castlebar. My husband, 19 and 4 months from getting on a boat, was brought into a room with the ganger and the company's man and told what had happened, in the past tense, as a settled thing. That the boy had wandered into an area he had no business in, that he had been warned off twice that morning, that the timbering had been set at the eastern end and the works carried out to standard. He signed a statement to that effect, and he answered 3 questions, and none of them were the right question, and nobody in that building ever asked whether anyone had called that boy down into the cut. The verdict was accidental death. The company paid the family nothing because there was nothing to pay for once the verdict said that. Desmond went home and told his mother he was going to America, and in November he went, and he did not come back except to bury her in 1988, And he did not drive the 12 miles to Ballyroe because the Lynch cottage is on that road, and he could not make himself pass it with his young wife in the car. 39 years of marriage, 2 children, 4 decades of Sundays. He had never said one word. Here's the rest of it, and this is where every single thing in my manila folder turned over in my hands and became something else. 14 months ago, on the computer at the public library, because he does not trust the one in our house, he found a small article in a Mayo newspaper. The Lynch family had petitioned to have the inquest reopened. A historian had gathered the files on 3 other deaths on drainage schemes in that county, and Poddy's sister, who was 14 when it happened, had put her name to it. The article asked anyone who had worked the Glenara scheme in 1971 to come forward. He wrote to them, in his own hand on a Wednesday, and posted it from the box outside the post office on Delaney Street, and then came home and made me a cup of tea and said nothing. M. Corrigan is Maeve Corrigan. She was Maeve Lynch. She is 72, she lives in Castlebar, and she is Poddy's sister. And the reason one of those calls ran 52 minutes at 6:10 in the morning is that she hung up on him twice before she would talk to him at all, and when she finally did, there was a great deal to say. The other calls were to a solicitor in Castlebar named Finton Brady, acting for the family, who told my husband plainly that he could promise him nothing, that evidence contradicting a signed statement from 1971 might raise questions about that statement, and that he ought to have his own representation. That representation, and the fee for retrieving the original file, is where $3,780 in cash went, $400 at a time, over the counter on Delaney Street. The Ardmore Inn, the 11th of September. He had an appointment at the passport agency the next morning because he had left it late and needed it expedited, and an hour with an immigration attorney at 4 in the afternoon to ask a question he could not ask anybody in Ashbury Mills, which was whether a naturalized American who gave a false statement to a coroner in Ireland in 1971 could be held there, or charged, or barred from coming home. He lied about the bricks because Ray Petrasky would have wanted to come along. And the ticket. 1 passenger, 4th of March, no return. I asked him about that last, at midnight, and it is the only time in the whole night that his voice went. He said, "I couldn't pick a day to come home." He said, "Ross, I didn't know if there'd be one. I didn't know what they'd do with me over there, and I didn't know what you'd do with me over here, and I thought if I could just get it said out loud in front of the right people, then whatever came after, at least it'd be said. And I couldn't put a return date on a thing I couldn't picture." I asked him the question I had carried in my chest since October. I said, "Were you leaving me?" He looked at me as though I had struck him and said, "No." And then he said the thing I think about most, which was, "I thought you might not want me after." Now I have to tell you my part, because it would be in at a kitchen table and me forgiving him, and that is not what happened. What happened is that I then had to sit there and tell him about the folder, about the legal pad, about the pencil rubbed over the notepad, about calling Ray's wife with a made-up bake sale, about the appointment with Delia Hart that I had canceled by 3 days, and about the fact that for 2 months, while that man sat out in a cold garage at 2 in the morning trying to work out how to say a boy's name to his wife, I had been upstairs building a case against him. He listened to all of it. And then he did the thing that undid me, which was to reach across and put his hand over mine and say, "Well, you'd have been right to. Look at it from where you were standing. There are things I should have seen, and they were never hidden at all." My husband was the most ferocious man about shoring who ever ran a crew in this county. He would shut a job down over a trench box. He made a 22-year-old cry on a site in Millersburg in 1996 over 4 feet of unsupported cut, and I thought that was simply his nature, and told people so, proudly. Every July, for 39 years, he went quiet for about a week, and we called it his Black Week, and I would make the good roast and let him alone. He crossed himself at the sight of an open excavation every time, and I teased him for it. I had been living inside the evidence for 4 decades. It was the wallpaper. You do not see the wallpaper. He flew on the 4th of March. I flew with him, on the same plane, on a ticket I bought myself in January, and I booked our return for the 20th, because one of us had to be able to picture it. The hearing was in Castlebar, in a room with radiators that clanked, and there were 11 people in it, including us. He gave evidence for 35 minutes. He said there was no timbering set on the western run, that it was stacked at the top of the field. He said he had signed in 1971 what he was given, and that it was not the truth. And then he was asked whether he had seen Podrick Lynch enter the excavation, and my husband, 74 years old, standing the whole time with his hands at his sides like a boy, said, "I called him down. I asked him to come and hold a line for me. He came down because I asked him to." The verdict was accidental death again, but this time it carried a finding about the absence of shoring, and a note that evidence given at the original inquest had been materially incomplete. There was no prosecution, nobody was charged. The ganger has been dead since 1989, and the company was wound up in the 70s, and there is not much the law can do to a wet field in 1971. Maeve Corrigan sat in the second row in a green coat and did not look at my husband once while he spoke. Afterwards, in the corridor, she came over. She said, "You were 19. And Desmond said, "I was." And she said, "You were 19, and it took you 54 years. And my mother went into the ground, being told her son was where he'd no business being." Then she went out through the double doors and did not take his hand. And that is the honest end of that part, and I will not dress it up. She wrote to him in June, 4 lines on a card, and he keeps it in the desk and has never shown it to me, and I have never asked. Our granddaughter was born on the 9th of April, 2 days early. Desmond held her in the hospital corridor and put his face down into that blanket and cried in a way I had not seen him cry at either wedding or at his own mother's grave, and for the first time in 39 years, I knew exactly what he was crying about, and that is the only thing in this whole account I would call a happy ending. The new passport is in the desk drawer now, out in the open, beside the old one. He still goes quiet in July. It is not better. It may be a little worse, because now it has a room to walk around in. I will tell you what I have taken from it. I did not miss the clues. That is what people assume when they hear this, that I was oblivious, and it is the opposite of true. I found every single thing there was to find. The withdrawals were real. The calls were real. The lie about the bricks was a lie. The one-way ticket said exactly what it said. I was an excellent investigator and a catastrophic interpreter, and there is a great deal of difference between those two women, and I did not know it until I had been one of them for 8 weeks. The whole thing turned on a piece of paper the size of a bookmark. A $60 expedite fee, paid in cash at the post office on Delaney Street, then filed in the September pocket with the word "passport" written on the back in ballpoint. That receipt did not fit my story, and it could not be made to fit it. A man who pays cash so his wife will not see the charge does not then file the proof in the drawer where she keeps the tax records. And when I found it in November, I did what I think most of us do. I took the one detail that did not fit and bent it until it did, because I had already built the shape of the thing and I did not want to take it apart. So here is the small, hard piece of it. In any story you are telling yourself about somebody you love, count the details. If 9 of them agree and 1 does not, the 9 are not the evidence. The 9 are the story you already had. The one that does not fit is the only thing in the room that is actually telling you something, because it is the only one that did not come out of your own head. Follow the wrong detail, not the ones that prove you right. My husband hid a passport in a golf bag for 2 months and kept the receipt for it in a labeled folder. And if I had followed the receipt instead of the passport, I would have reached him in the first week of November, and he would not have spent that winter out in a cold garage at 2 in the morning, trying to find a way to tell his wife a boy's name. He was never going anywhere I could not have gone with him. He only thought he had to go alone, because he had been alone with it since he was 19, and he had forgotten there was any other way to carry a thing.